Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Our co-host today is Chris Rossini. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Great to be with you again.
And just to keep the audience up to date, Chris is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com, our website. But today, Chris and I want to visit with you on the subject of a cashless society and Big Brother's attack on personal liberty, and especially on cash. It's an important issue. It's been around for a good many years. Actually, the principle of control of money and knowing where the money goes, that's been around as long as you have governments. But in these most recent years and decades, there's been a concerted effort by our government to convert us into thinking that cash is better. And instead of just announcing it and making sure that everybody, all right, all the currency is gone and you have to use credit cards, that sort of thing. Well, that would be chaotic. They have to condition people to do it, and the people have to think they're getting something for it. And of course, the first temptation is, well, it's convenient. You know, it used to be when I was in a line, you know, at the airport or something trying to buy a newspaper, if somebody was using a credit card and it was difficult, it was a delay. Now you're behind a line. You hope they don't use cash because they don't even know how to count cash at the cash register. So you want them to use a credit card and the line goes much faster. So it's convenient. So we get talked into it, and we think it's a good threat, a good deal for us. But on the other side of it, a cashless society and government control represents a threat to liberty. Maybe this whole thing about the control of cash is nothing more than the Big Brother effort to know every single thing, and they have a motivation for that. Most of the time, one of the strongest motivation of those in government that might believe in big government, you know, the conservatives and liberals, they need money all the time more, and they collect more money, you know, if there's pressure put on the people and they know where their money is and nobody's using cash and nobody's taking cash for work. So there's a concerted effort. So the state has a lot of reasons why they want to do that. Besides, there's some people who are statists, and it's certainly been true since 9/11. They just want to know what we're doing because you might be a terrorist and all these other things that we've given up with the Patriot Act and the National Defense Security Act and all these things where our liberties have been undermined. So the state has their agenda, and I think they tease us with it by tempting us to say, isn't it a lot more convenient? And all of a sudden the contest goes on. But there's a lot of people becoming savvy, especially the viewers of this program, that there's reason to think about the attack on cash and why it's important to protect this freedom.
Yes, and it is scary to know that they want to eliminate our economic privacy. I mean, not only do they want to know who we're buying from, what we're buying, how much we're spending, but they want to use this information. They're just not passive observers. And we could, concoct ideas of what they would do. Like for the left, they would love to use that for social engineering. What if a leftist government's, for your health, they just block your ability, your digital money, to buy from certain merchants because you're not healthy enough. Or let's say you want to donate to the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And people on the right, they don't like those ideas, and they just turn it off. And this is possible. We saw that last week or the last few weeks with the Catalonia vote. There were simple apps on Google Play to just find out where you can vote, and Google shut it off. And then once they shut it off, that's it. You don't find out where to vote. So this data isn't just there for mere observation. It's for power and to force people to do things. Now, is this out of line? Is it like tinfoil hat thinking? Well, if you think about what our government is doing now, they take every single one of our digital communications and put it in a database. It's not out of line for them to want to manipulate us once they know all of our economic activities. So, Dr. Paul, this is, it's a slow-moving process, like you said, to train us. Yeah. But it's ominous.
And, the right has an agenda, too, with some engineering, and that is it's the far right and sometimes the Christian right that feel like it's important for a moral reason that they not allow people to use drugs. And that might be a worthwhile goal, but not through the thuggishness of a monolithic state. But that, again, is one of the reasons why they don't want to, allow any underground spending, because somebody might use it for drugs. Of course, there wouldn't be that effort to hide it. If drugs happen to be legal, it would become a moral problem for the individual and the families. But that certainly is the case. But when the internet was coming into play, governments were very much involved, more than I realized at the time. And governments would come in, and I see so much of these social networks as being aligned with the government, because they do most of the spying, and then they get exempt from any liability, and the governments work very closely. So it's the private sources that collect the information. And the information and the ability to do this was better developed in the marketplace where they were making profits. Although this leads to a collusion of big business and government, which is sort of, corporatism or fascism, because government individuals aren't usually ahead of the curve on technology. And I think that might be something we should think about, on the cryptocurrencies. I've thought about this now for several years, about the relationship of our government with the development of cryptocurrencies, because the first time this question was asked, I think it was Bernanke, he did not come down negative on it. And even now, our government is tolerant, and you're allowed to put cryptocurrencies into your retirement funds, and some of the people who develop cryptocurrencies work with the IRS to develop, the regulations, and profits are reported on 1099s. So I'm a strong believer in modern technology, trying to protect us from the spying of government. I don't like it when they start working with the government. And right now, I think the government is very interested, along with, convincing us not to use cash, that they're going to monitor, because the market is pretty powerful about these cryptocurrencies if they really work. And I think it's still a question how well they're going to work, but the technology is there. The government's not smart enough to know about it, but just like they were smart enough to get involved in the internet. And another example of how governments work through some regulations is the withholding tax. I think it was a very conservative libertarian who suggested the withholding tax. Convenience. They took $10,000 from me last year, and I got $2,000 back. They don't remember they took 10. They say, I just got $2,000 back from the government. And besides, it's very efficient in collecting things. So this combination with making things efficient and convenient, it would be much better. Just think of a tax system that was based on you and I and everybody writing a check at the end of the month for what we owe in taxes. Believe me, there would be a tax revolt a long time ago, instead of all this mishmash we go through and filling out forms and then hoping we get a couple dollars back and not thinking about what we really pay. And then, of course, the other big tax is the inflation tax, but that's a different subject. But I think that we're going to see more of this war on privacy and war on our cash, and it is a significant event. It's a contest between privacy and the government, and government is supposed to be there to protect our privacy with the Fourth Amendment. That is not happening. Our government is the biggest threat to our privacy. That is why this whole effort, the transition we're going through, the war on cash, and the relationship of government to the cryptocurrencies, this is very significant on what the outcome should be. It would be really neat if we could limit this technology to protecting our privacy, rather than having those who issue the currencies or whatever they do, and the computer programs, is to protect us from the state. That's what I would like to see.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe someday there is a future for cryptocurrencies, but I'm very skeptical right now. And you made a great point how the Federal Reserve didn't come down hard on them. And there's, I think, a misconception that people think, oh, this Bitcoin, it's going to take down the Fed and this and that. If there's one thing about power, it's when they fear something, they ignore it totally. That's why you'll never hear about Ludwig von Mises or Murray Rothbard in the New York Times. It'll never happen. And Dr. Paul, when you ran for president, they just shut you down. They did not want people to know about Ron Paul. Your supporters and myself, we all know that. That's why your supporters were renting blimps. Google Ron Paul. So because when power fears something, they ignore it. Now, over the last several weeks, for weeks, I'm listening to Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan and Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs give all of their opinions on Bitcoin. I don't think they fear Bitcoin at all. If they're shining a light on it and talking about it in public, I don't believe that they're afraid.
See, what is on the side of the private development of these programs, and you've described why we have to be concerned about the Fed and the IRS, but the one thing on our side of this is the failure that is coming. You know, I don't think we're going to pass a law and abolish the Federal Reserve, and we have enough trouble trying to get an audit of the Federal Reserve, but it's a reasonable thought that their system, this fiat system, is going to fail. And failure might look something like Puerto Rico, you know, where everything seizes up and nobody can do anything. And they've been taught that credit cards, everybody wants to go and use their credit cards and go to the ATM machine in order to get their cash, and no electricity, they can't do this, and their system totally fails. And I kept thinking, you know, even though if they could get their cryptocurrency working and it was more in use, that would be one thing, but there would be some limits. But just think of, in terms of the ultimate money. Ultimate originated in the marketplace 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, and it had to be something of real value. But, you know, survivalists still believe that one of the things to do for a circumstance of Puerto Rico would be for families each to own a bag of silver. This was more popular and talked about in the 1970s because there was rampant price inflation. But, and if you do go out and buy a bag of silver, they call it junk silver because it's old silver, it's not numismatic. But in a way, this junk silver is probably one of the things that would have solved a lot of problems, you know, in Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. So this is not talked about too much, but that to me is the ultimate protection. But the real protection is not to have a government that's there disobeying the Fourth Amendment, invading our privacy, being a threat to our liberties, and working with big companies and providing these services and promoting the corporate state, you know, the corporate welfare system, whether it's in the financial markets or the media markets or the military markets. This is where the real problem is, and we're talking, I think, more about symptoms and this struggle. I really do believe the cryptocurrency people who believe in this are very hopeful, and I hope it does work. I hope this can curtail, you know, some of this intrusion by government, but it remains to be seen. We don't know how this will pan out, but I think if there's a little bit of confusion, it never hurts to have some gold coins around and silver coins around to continue your transactions, and that still, I know, would be chaotic, but how would people adapt? I'm amazed at the culture today of individuals who might be working at a small store someplace, and you give them a bill, and if the machine doesn't tell them what they have to give you back, they have no idea how to make change. You know, this is bewildering because I grew up in an age where delivering newspapers and milk and all these kind of things where I had to make change all the time, and we were taught these things. But today, a lot of people that work in the store, it's a machine. But what happens when the machines fail us, or what happens if the machines control us, and what happens if the machines are there to collect records for the government? And I think we're awfully close to that, and that is why symbolically and politically we should point out the dangers of the cashless society. Cash is a protection of liberty, and even if we don't use it very much, that should be something that we should protect. Matter of fact, it's our right to do it. But at the rate we're going, we're going to see more demands on an intrusion on our privacy because the government's always going to need more money, you know. And if printing more money doesn't raise the prices fast enough, they want to do something else, so they'll want to attack us in a certain way. But right now, I think it's a systematic attack on our privacy once more to enhance the power of the state to get rid of all cash transactions, I think they're going to have a little trouble, but the more people educated to this, the better it will be to prevent it from happening.
Yes, my closing thought today, Dr. Paul, I do want to, what I see is to make a warning, beware, because this is going to be sold as a convenience. And, everything will be denied. We're not going to control anything. Those people are crazy. You'll be able to do whatever you. They lie. Just like when they started Social Security, the card, it said this will not be used for identification purposes. Look at today. It is the identification system for everyone. The same thing with taxes, the income tax. It was just for the rich. Nobody's even going to worry about it now. We're spending half our income is going to the government. So they sell it. They just try to nudge it in there. This is going to be convenient. Don't worry about those crazy people that say this is going to be used to control you. But they're lying, and we should learn our lesson sooner or later that that's the way it goes.
And a lot of people have been, reassured at times. They want to be reassured because they could say today consumer confidence is up, the stock market is up, there's more jobs than ever. At the same time, you have a middle class that seems to be very, very concerned. And they just wonder. I get the questions, when is it going to happen? People have been talking about this for a long time. And actually in '09 with that crash, that was significant. And we haven't recovered it from it because all we did was we created more debt. And some people have benefited from the debt, government debt, and they've been able to buy more weapons, and they've continued the process. And people have been borrowing more money, and mortgages have gone up, and stock markets have gone up. So they said, well, what can we do? When is this going to happen? And we don't know when it'll happen. But one thing for sure, it's going to happen, because it can't continue that people will believe in and that the system will work, that all you have to do is create new digits in a computer and have new money and pass it out to people and they're going to feel wealthy. No, you need a free society, you need a productive society, you need people to save. You don't have capitalism, free market capitalism, unless you have productions and savings. That's where capital comes from. Capital doesn't come from the Federal Reserve. So the system is totally flawed. It's amazing how on the surface they've been able to paint a rather favorable picture. But it will come to an end. So our responsibility as individuals who have a different take on this is to provide the answers and say, yes, it's coming. We don't know when, but the more people who are protected, the better off we're all going to be. And there's nothing wrong with studying and understanding private free market alternatives like cryptocurrencies, as long as there's no force or fraud. But ultimately, the responsibility will fall on us. That means, what are we going to replace this with? And of course, we have been talking a long time about a system based on personal liberty, and that is the goal. If you have personal liberty, you have free markets, your life is your own, and the fruits of your labor will be your own, and we mind our own business overseas. That's a not too big a recipe, and it could be achieved if we just changed our attitude, and we'll have to do it because we've lived way beyond our means. We continue to do it, and we will be forced to live beneath our means, and half of our population has already been forced to live beneath its means. So the other half is prosperous, and skew the statistics in a way, things look pretty good. So Chris, I want to thank you very much for being with us today, and I want to express my appreciation to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul.
Good. And I want to tell the viewing audience that we do deeply appreciate you tuning into our program, and please come back soon to the Ron Paul Liberty Report.